Welcome to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. The Alumni podcast where you get to hear the inspiring stories and transformation that DVC has had to offer its alumni. And now, on with the episode. Hey folks, this is Charley Daly, the alumni manager for Diablo Valley College and also your podcast host for DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. And I'm doing this little intro. This is a podcast that I did very early on back. Oh my gosh, it would have been in 2024. And it was with Dr. Michael Galvez, a very distinguished alumni of DVC. And he's got a great story, but his big thing, and I happen to think this is a wonderful cause to be championing, is he's gotten Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, and a few others behind the National Latino and Latina Physicians Day, which is a great cause, is to get more people of Latino descent to become healthcare workers, whether it's nurses and doctors and things of that nature, because there's a definite significant need for that. So this is a repeat of that particular episode, but I did want to publish it on October 1st, and so I'm queuing this up and on with the podcast. All right, and we are live, and so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Michael Galvez. I am a full-time pediatric surgeon here in the Central Valley of California, and I am a proud Diablo Valley College alumni.
Cool. Well, I am certainly very excited to have you here on this. So let's start with kind of where you started. How did you kind of your journey getting to Diablo Valley College? Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so both my parents are from Peru, from Lima, Peru. They immigrated here before I was born. I grew up in San Francisco. My parents moved us from San Francisco. It was near the Mission District at the time, which is different the way that it is now. But back then, it wasn't a wonderful place to grow up. And so my dad had a business just near there. And so they decided to move us to a more affluent area, and they moved us to Walnut Creek.
Oh,
And so I grew up in Walnut Creek I went to elementary school, middle school, high school. And I would try to take like the harder courses, but I just didn't know how to study. I had part of my journey also is I had my grandfather was a pediatric surgeon in Lima, Peru, and they came here before I was born because of political unrest at the time relating to the Shining Path. And he came here and he was probably about 50 years of age, and he wasn't able to recertify in medicine. And he actually ended up working in HVAC and in air conditioning, fixing air conditioners and things like that. But we were really grateful though, because, and I say this a lot, I was privileged because he would take care of us growing up. We would get sick, and, he would come and see us, and it was healthcare that wouldn't have been otherwise available. Cause I grew up without health insurance. Kids weren't all insured, growing up. And so the reason that part of the story, I talk about that story a lot because I call it a privilege, because I knew that I could be a doctor, right? Because he was a doctor in Peru. And so I always had that idea in the back of my mind. And I just struggled in middle school, high school. I was completely unfocused. I worked jobs, in high school. I worked at a Togo's, I worked at a Banana Republic. And so I would work a lot. I would go to school and I just, wouldn't get a great GPA, and my GPA was a 2.8. And then I remember specifically as I was finishing college, went to the kind of the college counselor, and she pointed me to community college. I shouldn't even look at the ability for me to go to a standard UC. She just pointed me to the brochures. That's what she did.
yeah.
Take a look. And so, there was a couple things that happened. I talk about this in my story. Is I was seeing many within my high school. They were all going to college. They were going to Davis. They were going to Berkeley, to UC Berkeley. And so I knew I knew that I was smart enough, and it was a combination of things. Part of my story also is I was lifting weights at a a local gym, the Gold's Gym, and I bumped into a friend. His name's Dan Baker from high school, and he had worked at this facility called the Joint Genome Institute, which is in Walnut Creek. It's a laboratory,
Yeah.
and so I found this job. Luckily, I was just lifting weights, and he's like, "Hey, dude, do you want to check out this job?" And I was like, he was like, "It's $15 an hour," and I'm like, "Yeah, I want to check that out." Like, I'm making $7 or $8 an hour. And so, and it sounded cool, and so I actually ended up working there. It happened fortuitously, like, I was working there as I finished high school and as I started community college, and the job was great because it was a laboratory environment, there were a lot of different scientists. We weren't doing, like, an incredible amount of detailed work, but we were working in a lab, and it was cool, we were being well compensated, and I had a group of friends there that some that were also going to community college. Shout out to Nicole Ramos, who was also a student with me at the time. And so we would work in this lab, and we were motivated because it was a good job, and so a good job in science. And then I started community college, and so part of my I started over the summer right after high school, and I have used this successfully throughout, because I haven't mentioned this, but I tell the families that I see now in my clinic that I went to 30th grade. I did 18 years of post training after high school, 18 and a half, and I'll talk about those details. But I had this idea. I knew I had seen my brother, one of my brothers struggle in taking classes at the University of California. Like, it was really hard. You would
Yeah.
take a class and then you don't do that well, and you take a class, and I had done that as well. And I've learned this lesson, the definition of insanity, which I think everyone should be very well aware is you do something, you don't do the exact same thing. You have to try something different. And so I took that approach in my coursework. And what did I do? I started with one, maybe two classes, one class over, I think it was two classes over the summer, but just one science class. And I learned and I tasted how to get an A. And the other thing I did is I went to Barnes& and Noble, the Barnes& and Noble in Walnut Creek.
Hmm.
I still go to Barnes& and Noble and study. I still get the same chocolate chip cookie. And it's Barnes& and Noble's fantastic, and I would go to the study section, and I got a couple of books. I don't have the exact books. I wish I still had them, but one book was How to Organize Yourself, and the other book was How to Study. And how to organize yourself is to make checklists, which I still do. I still live off of checklists. And then the other is uh, how to study, which is for me, what worked for me was to go to class, do the best that I could to listen, read what I was supposed to read, not just check off the boxes, but like I would do the homework and then I would do the homework again. I would do my homework twice so that I would get through it, and then I would um, test myself before the test. And so that was really, really successful for me, especially at DVC. And so I took that initial um, chemistry class and I got an A. So
Oh,
I
wow.
tasted how to get an A, my first science course. And then I didn't stop. So after that, I did the same thing the second quarter. I think I took one or two classes, science classes, and then I met with the transfer counselor, and I developed a plan of how I was going to get to Berkeley, essentially. Um, and the other key component for my success at Diablo Valley College was the math lab. And you can see in my mind, I give these big talks related to the work that I do with National Latino Physician Day, which we'll talk about. But I feel the same. I feel like I look at these buildings at DBC. I feel like I'm just coming out of the chem class. I feel like I'm just going to work at the Joint Genome Institute. I'm the same person back then. And so these things you're going to see through my story, these experiences I've had, I still feel exactly the same. And so the 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 math lab, like I would go to math course. It was hard, but then I would go to the math lab and I would understand. And those resources that Diablo Valley College gave me were essential because they allowed me to succeed. They allowed for me to get an A. They allowed for me to study, be tested, And if I studied and tested, then I would do well. And so that is what medicine is essentially is you study something, you get tested and you know the answer and then you help the patient. And those tests that I've had in medical school and residency are the same. And so this is part of the story where it gets a little bit dark. I DVC was one of the best things that I've done. And when you talk to any other student that's gone to community college and then has gone to the University of California, they all agree.
Yeah.
And so then I go to the University of California, and you're going to see how this story is going to go full circle. It's kind of crazy because the end of the story is we just passed a law that is requiring the University of California to provide transparency in who gets admitted to medical school.
Hmm.
So now we'll go back to community college. So I went to DVC, best thing ever. Went to Berkeley, the worst thing ever. One of the
Really?
hardest things that I have done. Yes, yes.
And
And
not in a good way.
it has nothing to do with um, the amazing facilities, the prestige of being at Berkeley, the the student environment. It was wonderful. Like I love being a student there. But what I mean by the worst thing is the academic aspect. The
Mhm.
fact that I would show up to class, I would study, I would use these same techniques, study, and they would test me on something completely different, something they just made up. And I remember, I'm telling you, I am that same student. I remember studying for the physics class and I would study in the classroom, they would teach us a problem. This monkey gets shot out of a cannon, it flies through the air and then lands in a cup or something like that. You're measuring the trajectory, all those things, speed. And so you hear about it in the lecture. You hear about it when you're reading and studying for it for a problem. You then practice the problem, right? Those are the strategies that I use. And so on the day of the test, I was ready. But guess what? On the day of the test, that monkey hits a ceiling fan that's turning, and it hits the ceiling fan and it's turning now, and then it gets shot out again. And so that's what I saw when I took all these courses is I would study really, really hard in a similar fashion, but I wasn't successful at Berkeley. I wasn't as successful as I was, and I'll mention why this is important. And these are some of the things we're trying to change. It doesn't like, how is it that I studied? How is it that I put the time in? And how is it that they're not testing me on what I studied? And this isn't to scare the students. It's for them to be aware. The strategies for learning are gonna be different when we transfer. And you will be successful, but Berkeley was one of the hardest things that I did because of that, because I would study and I couldn't see those results. And so I graduated with Berkeley with a 3.1 GPA. I got an A in a plant biology class. All the other classes I got a B. And what's challenging about that is when you apply to medical school, they want letters of recommendation
Yep.
on your science courses. I tried my absolute best and I could not, it was almost impossible. And the reason this is important is because I feel there are a lot of students, minority students particularly, that they transfer and then they finish not with a great GPA and they can't move forward. They have to do a post back. They have to dig themselves out of the hole. And I don't think I don't think it's necessarily their fault. This isn't to discourage them. I was able to make it through and I'll explain how, but DVC was the reason for my success, in my opinion, because I learned how to study there. Berkeley was challenging, one of the hardest things that I did, and I got through it, and I'll explain. So I finished Berkeley, a little bit of PTSD, as you can see, and I was like, okay, I want to apply to medical school. I don't, my GPA kind of, it's inflated because of my community college. It should be enough. I have to take the MCAT. I couldn't take the MCAT at the same time because Berkeley was so challenging with their coursework. And so I ended up, and I hadn't been in the hospital yet. I had grown up without insurance. And so I volunteered at a hospital. I volunteered at a hospital where I was just hanging at John Muir, actually. And I was handing out juice and blankets. That was my experience there. That was I knew that wasn't a valuable experience, right? I knew I wasn't seeing what medicine was about, what it takes to be a doctor. And so I ended up finding this opportunity to SF General at San Francisco General Hospital. Well, all of a sudden it was hands-on. It's a county hospital. I was, helping irrigating wounds. I was translating Spanish. I was seeing the doctors, doing the work. And shadowing is so important. Being able to see somebody else and then envisioning, can I do that? And so in the ER, I was like, I can do this. I understand what I'm getting into a little bit better. And so I shadowed, and at Berkeley, I didn't start, another group of students started, but I helped run a mentorship program that brought Berkeley students to an underserved area of the mission. And then I got a job. I got a job in a lab. And the funny thing is, I got this job because of a weird hobby I had. I was at Berkeley, and there's this place called the East Bay Bavarium that they have snakes and lizards and really cool,
My
really
son bought a
amazing.
couple of snakes from them.
Yeah,
Yep.
herpetology is so cool. I don't have any. My wife doesn't let me have any snakes right
Yeah.
now. But like I had these animals in my dorm room, and I had to feed them mice, and so I was breeding mice in my closet.
Oh, I'm sure that went
Essentially.
over like a pregnant pole vaulter, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the so when I was applying for jobs, I found this laboratory job at UCSF, and it was in a pulmonary research job. And the reason Dr. Harold Chapman, the reason he hired me was because he liked that. He was like, "You're going to be working with mice and research, and you were breeding mice, so you have actually the most experience." So my weird hobby helped me land this job, and the job was fantastic. Was treated with respect, got to do research, got to think for myself. And I actually, this is a cool story. I showed up, and they had been working on this knockout mouse. Essentially, a knockout mouse is where they remove genes out of a mouse. They had a researcher had spent years making this knockout mouse for cathepsin F. See, I remember all this stuff. Cathepsin F is it's a it breaks down proteins essentially. And what they knocked it out of this mouse, and I showed up, and I had to learn about mice breeding and the experiments they were doing. And they thought this mouse knocking out this gene would change lung function. And, but when I got there, I was looking through all the cages. There's like thousands of cages at UCSF. And then I noticed that in some of these cages that were labeled cathepsin F, that about a quarter of them, some of them they looked more raggedy, and they were limping. They weren't using their back legs well. They looked just different. And so they hadn't found a function, that they hadn't found a phenotype is what it's called, something that had changed the the function of the mouse. And what I ended up doing is I ended up genotyping all these mice, and they correlated. Those mice that had been that ha- were that weren't didn't have normal back leg function, they were they were those cathepsin F knockouts. And so I helped find the phenotype of what had happened. So if you knock out this gene, they end up they're missing this proteasome, protein that breaks down other proteins. And so it was causing lipofuscinosis, which essentially was building up these lesions in the brain and in the spinal cord. Really cool stuff. Like, I got to help figure that out with this other PhD student, who was also very respectful and appreciated my input through this. And what was cool about the lab is the reason why this experience was important is because it allowed me to talk about, like, I got to shadow some of the doctors seeing pulmonary patients, and then I got to help with the research and do it in the lab. And so when I was applying to medical school, yes, and I had to take the MCAT twice, and the language portion was the hard part. I took it again for the language portion to get higher, and I actually got lower.
Oh,
Uh, and I grew up speaking English. It's definitely. I mean, it's a
yeah.
second language, as in, like, I probably started speaking it when I was one or two, but it's just a really challenging test, and I took it twice, but I ended up doing better in the sciences overall. And I end up applying to medical school, and I do fairly well because I have I have these experiences, right? Leadership with the mentoring, research with the lab. Berkeley, except for the GPA. And actually, Dr. Mattern, who's a biology teacher from DVC, he wrote me a letter for medical school, which I very much appreciate. Um, and because I couldn't get letters from Berkeley, like it was almost impossible. I think I ended up getting one, but it was not ideal. And anyway, so part of my story is I was volunteering at that SF General, and I met Dr. Armajit Dosanjh, who's from the Central Valley, and he from Modesto. He took me under his wing when I was applying to medical school, and I asked him all these questions. I was very assertive, and you're going to see this is important too when you're trying to figure out where you fit in. And so he helped me like go through my application, helped me with my personal statement stuff. And then when I was applying, I got into some pretty good schools. I got into UCSF with a full ride. I got into UCLA, and then I got rejected from Stanford. And I was
Wow.
interested in Stanford because I went to this conference. I went to this conference at Stanford called SUMA, and it's a pre-med conference. And that's where I was like, wow, this is an amazing place. I would love to come here. I want to do surgery, I think, because I was doing these procedures on these mice. I like being hands-on with things. Um, and for other hands-on things, I like doing art and Boys and Girls Club. I would do things with wood and making things. And so anyway, so I end up getting rejected, and he's like, "Why don't you appeal?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean appeal? What do you mean they rejected me?" He's like, "Write them a letter and tell them you're doing this research. You just got this other paper published." And so I did that. And so I ended up um, getting interviewed, and then I ended up getting accepted. And so it changed my trajectory, in my opinion, because I ended up getting into the place I really wanted to go. And then I started Stanford. And the crazy thing is, I started Stanford doing plastic surgery research almost immediately. And that's another thing to know is as you go to different universities, there's privilege in what university you get to go to, and they have different opportunities. And so I was like, because I knew this plastic surgery resident, he was like, join this plastic surgery lab. And I joined, and I was doing microsurgery in the first week of medical school,
Oh,
which is
wow.
with tiny little surgery, which actually correlated to tiny little surgery I was doing on mice before. And so I started there, and I ended up staying at Stanford for 11 years. So I did 5 years of research. I did 5 years of medical school, including a year of research in plastic surgery, plastic and reconstructive surgery. And then I did 6 years of residency. I stayed there for plastic surgery. And then when I was at in medical school, I decided I wanted to do hand surgery. When I got to go to a trip in La Paz, Bolivia, where I saw a lot of kids with hand differences, burns, congenital hand differences, and I just fell in love with that type of surgery in that patient population. And so I knew I wanted to do pediatric hand surgery. And then and then I decided to go into fellowship. So I did two fellowships, one in Seattle, and then one in Texas for pediatric hand surgery. And this is where the 18 and a half years of training comes. And so when I was graduating residency, I heard about this job here in the Central Valley, at Valley Children's Hospital, and it's an area that serves more than 75% of our patients are Medi-Cal. Our patient population is 66 Latino patients.
Oh,
And I
man.
think that is what I tell people all the time. I come from the future because we have a growing Latino patient population, and you see it here already in the Central Valley. Um, and so, yeah, I've been here for the past 5 years doing very complex surgeries, from making a thumb to breaking bone and creating. We actually can do 3D templates to plan where you want to make the cuts to fix complex deformities. And so I've been here for the past 5 years, and it's really has been my dream job and taking care of kids with these hand differences and taking care of an underserved population. Now, that's my professional work. The other part that I'd like to talk about is I ended up starting this movement called National Latino Physician Day.
Yep.
And what this is essentially is just seeing throughout my career that it hasn't really changed. I haven't really seen a change in the number of Latino physicians, or surgeons. And when I got here at Valley Children's, I realized that locally they only make 12 medical students a year in an MD program, and only two of those were Latino for that year. And I was like, how we have this huge millions of people here. How are we only making two Latino students? And then I went back to Stanford, and just looking at their faculty and staff, I was like, why is there such a low amount of surgeons? I came from there. And I tried to engage in saying, hey, how can I help? And there really wasn't much interest. There really wasn't much interest. And so I was like, okay, I guess I have to start a movement because we have to create this awareness that we need more Latino doctors. Now, why do we mean, why does ethnicity matter? And what specifically is the part of culture and the part of language. Spanish
Mhm.
language sometimes is ignored. And if you think about it, if you go to a visit, you have 30 minutes. Not always, 15 minutes sometimes, right? So let's say it's a 30-minute visit and it's an English speaking doctor. You get 30 minutes of the time to interact, to understand, right? But if you speak Spanish and the provider doesn't speak Spanish, that amount of time gets cut in half. And then not only that, but it's even when you speak English, you don't understand, right? So imagine for the Spanish speaker and the trust aspect. And so that's one of the reasons that we need more Latino physicians is to create that awareness. And so the stats are this: it's 6% Latino, 6.9%. State of California is 40% Latino.
Jeez.
Increasing. It's expected. Actually, about 1 in 2 babies right now are Latino, so it's going to change even more these demographic. And a majority of those do speak, not a majority, but about half speak Spanish. And that's another reason for language. And so the work we've done in the last year, so this was founded about 3 years ago. We just had the third year this yesterday. And so in the last year, I was able to present in front of Senator Bernie Sanders.
Yep.
And I got to talk about things for this movement, which is we need a bilingual, bicultural medical school. So where people come out of medical school speaking the language. And they can be not Latino, right? They could be someone who's learned language before, but how can we create these criteria? The second thing was not to ignore language. We need language integrated into medicine and valued and taught. Um, the third thing is valuing community college. So I was there. I mentioned that in front of Bernie Sanders, like community college has so much diversity, and that is a
Yep.
source of pool. And the co-founder for this National Latino Physician Day is Cesar Padilla, who is from the Bay Area as well. He went to community college. I think he went to Laney, and um, we have everyone has that same experience. We loved our community college experience, and it was my foundation for medical school. I didn't even mention this before. Medical school is easy. Medical school compared to Berkeley, like you show
Really.
up to class, you study, and they test you on what you study. And community college taught me how to study for medical school, and that's a huge statement, right? Community college prepared me for Stanford Medical School. Berkeley did not. Berkeley just scarred me, right? As I mentioned, it didn't prepare me. How did it prepare me if I would study and I would come out being like, what just happened? I don't even know what I just took, right? We have to, when we study and we get tested, the value comes out when you know that you knew that information and that confidence. That's what happens in medicine. And I did 99th percentile on my boards. I passed my plastic surgery boards. Like it was not. There's a problem in the system, and that's what National Latino Physician Day wants to talk about too. Even the barriers like the MCAT. Why do we have this test that is a barrier for underserved students? Yes, we need a parameter. You need to make sure that people know how to study, but it literally, like the students that do well can come from privileged backgrounds.
Yep.
Let me give you an example. A student who lives in Walnut Creek, rich suburb, it has protected space to study versus a student who is living in the Mission, who is hearing gunshots at night, his family member may be an alcoholic, and they have to work. Like,
Yeah.
How is that the same? It's not. And so some of those barriers I think need to change. And so anyway, and then the last thing was to increase loan repayment programs and to really lower the cost of medical school. And so that's what we've done this past year. We were able to pass this resolution. So this October 1st, it went through the Assembly, Congress, and the Senate to designate October 1st as National Latino Physician Day. We got a letter from Governor Gavin Newsom regarding the day to acknowledge it. And then this is the most important part. We created this huge social media campaign. We've had live events. One event at UC Riverside had 300 medical students.
Oh,
Sorry,
wow.
300 attendees, not medical students. 300
Yeah.
attendees, pre-meds, medical students, creating this day of awareness. UC Irvine had an event at their hospital, had an event at their medical school. Stanford had a large event. UCSF had a whole day long event. We had over 10 different live events to create this awareness. How can we change this system? And again, it sounds like a day of celebration, and yeah, that's part of it. But really, it's how can these institutions change what they're doing, because what they're doing is not working. Another example: how many medical students do we make in the Central Valley? Is 12 at UCSF Fresno. MD medical students, only 12 a year. It's expected
There's
in the next 5 to 7 years that 30% of physicians will retire in the Central Valley. And then the other question is, how many medical students is the University of California planning to make in the Central Valley? Like, they're planning, right? They're building. They have a new campus at UC Merced, so there's a new building, but there's only 12 medical students that are coming out of there to start off with. Yes, and it's going to increase, but what, 12? Like, what are these numbers? Who's making these numbers? And then guess what's happened? We've had these, and this is where the business part becomes important in medicine. We've had these private medical schools open up. There's one here in Clovis, great medical school. It's a DO, osteopathic medical school, but those students come out with $400 to $500,000 in debt. Are they going to stay locally? Are
no,
they going to become pediatricians with a lower salary? This is very obvious stuff, and who's in charge of this? And so that's what National Latino Physician Day is, not just a Latino issue. It's like we have a very broken system. We have to create pathways so we can take care of the population, and it requires this multi-pronged approach. And then some of the other successes for National Latino Physician Day. No, just yeah, we're just moving forward. It's a grassroots effort. It went across the country. Because it's a growing population, we are changing. The United States demographics are changing, and we have to consider these aspects. And then also the structural, systemic barriers that we see, that we know exist. Why do we have, and at UC Berkeley again? Sorry, UC Berkeley, but why do we have professors that are chemistry professors or physics professors? That's what they do. They do research in that. How are they the barrier to who becomes a doctor? A
yeah,
doctor who takes care of patients, who communicates, we want doctors that are well-rounded. We want doctors that are not just studious, right? That's just one component, is to be smart. There's a lot of different factors. Communication is a big one. Those are the benefits of diversity. And then there's something I keep wanting to say. And then the other thing, we helped pass a bill. So we have a bill that it's called AB 2080 that let's just do this grassroots effort that is requiring the University of California to report how many students are coming from community college, right?
really.
How many students are coming from state school? We've never asked them that question. We've never asked them that question. If you go to some of them are doing a good job for sure. UC Davis is doing a fantastic approach. They have a holistic approach to admissions, but some of them are like, they're accepting students from Harvard, from Ivy League schools, and guess where those students are going? They're leaving the state, or they're not serving the underserved populations. And so I do think that question, if we're investing in California, if we're making a fantastic community college like Diablo Valley College, we have students that are competent. You know them, you see them, they're bright, they're willing, they're able, they're hardworking. We need to keep them. Um, and yes, and there is a big population of Latino students that go to community colleges, right? And Black students as well, and Native American, but that diversity, we need all these aspects of diversity to change our healthcare system, because the way that we've made it isn't working. It's not, it doesn't make sense. And so, yeah, there's a little bit. So hopefully this can inspire, the student from community college, keep moving forward, um, start slow, taste the A, learn how to study, ask for help, use your resources, get to that next step. Have a plan, and then know that when you transfer, it's going to be hard. You'll get through it, but have a plan, find mentorship. And you can see I've had hundreds of mentors to get to where I am. And then when you get to your job, you're going to get your job, but then look up and say, what's going on here? Right? Like, this isn't, yeah, I could just keep my job. I could retire and become a plastic surgery surgeon tomorrow, a cosmetic surgeon. I could be like, oh, I just want to make money. That's not going to happen, right? You have to think about why you went into this field and why you want to help and how you're going to fix it. And there's many broken aspects of our healthcare system, but we have family members, right? We have family members ourselves as we age. We want to make sure that we have a system that we want our family members to go to. And right now, it's terrifying. My abuelita, she passed away this past year in Riverside. Very fantastic. She was an obstetrician in Peru, but during COVID, for example, she didn't want to go to the hospital
Hmm.
because she broke her hip. Like she would cry, not because of a broken hip, but that she needed surgery because she didn't want to be isolated by the hospital during COVID. Right? They would
Yep.
isolate humans without translation sometimes. That's prison. Like that's like we can do better than that. We can help patients and for them to feel comforted, for someone to connect with them, for someone to speak the language, for them to understand. And that's where those are the types of changes I think we need, so that we have humans searching and wanting help from our physicians and from our hospital systems. I can keep going. But that's where I'm at.
Wow. I have a pull quote, which is the DVC prepared me to go to medical school, Stanford Medical School,
Yeah,
not UC Berkeley.
that's right.
Which,
That's right.
by the way, that's probably going to be the headline on it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Um, but and the reason is, and I'm also going to take this and bottle it up, and then I'm going to take it over to the transfer folks because I think
Yeah,
this is going to
fantastic.
be very, very important.
Yeah,
I absolutely, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, I'm a good deal older than you, so DVC does not look like it did when I came here, which I think is a good thing because it looks more like the community that we're in now. And
oh,
there
good,
does need
good,
to
good, good.
be
It's more diversified.
oh, it is, and there needs to be a lot more diversity in the medical field, and especially because I was thinking about being isolated, being in a place where basically nobody speaks your language. I mean, that I think that's actually worse than prison because at least in prison, you're going to be able to find somebody to talk to, you
Yeah.
know. And so no, seriously, so it's like
Yeah, no, I love that. That is a good point. I just feel so terrified. Like she
yeah,
literally was just terrified,
yeah.
terrified, terrified. And
Well,
met they it just comes down to explaining things too. It's when you make something a business,
yep.
it's business interactions, right? Oh, you're here. I'm gonna check your blood pressure. Okay, okay, see you later. Bye. Not like, hey, how are you doing? How are you actually feeling? How was the food? When is your family coming? And those are the healthcare. That's what we've accepted in our healthcare system. We've accepted that it's this business interaction. What's your insurance? Rather than how are we going to get you home safely?
Yes.
Like it's like PTSD. Like my abuelita had PTSD. Like she did it. Like again, it wasn't the health aspect. It was the fact that she
It
was
was no
fearful of being
humanity.
isolated. Yeah,
Yeah, it
fearful of
was the
being
no humanity. I
isolated.
know. The reason I
Yeah, and
really,
and the
really
same thing for an elderly person that speaks English. It's the same thing.
yes. Well, and I love my physician I've had with Kaiser for I don't know 10 or 15 or 20 years, and the reason I like him is like for one he does check in with me once in a while, but the other thing too is he yells at me about when I'm doing stuff. He actually will raise his voice and go, "What do you think you're doing?" And it makes it a much more human interaction for me. It's not just he just listens and checks the boxes. He actually listens to what's going on,
Yeah,
and he tells me, "No, you need to go eat a salad," or whatever it is.
sure, sure.
And I think I absolutely agree. I think a lot of healthcare has lost that human touch, because
Yeah,
what is it? There's 200 years ago, it was well before aspirin. It was like a physician was a guy that came and you saw, and he took care of what he could, but it was a very human interaction, and it has become a factory. And so hopefully we can,
yeah.
hopefully
The
through
culture,
efforts
the
like
culture has to change. The
yeah,
culture of medicine has to change, and then we have the electronic medical record system, and then we have
yep,
results in burnout and the well-being of physicians, and then they're talking about artificial intelligence, and what we need is actual intelligence. You can quote me on that. What we need is
yes.
actual intelligence of people that know how to communicate, and spend the time and aren't being pushed from the business
Well,
perspective.
I could see AI, and I mean, I've been doing. We have a podcast that's coming out this coming Tuesday on a guy who's his whole thing is machine learning and AI and stuff like that. And he says, once we get over the fear of it, things like what you do, it's not going to replace the surgery and the human touch. What it's going to do is make kind of
Make it
the
easier. Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
hope
going to
so.
make the stuff on the back end a
Yeah.
lot easier, and plus, it may even give you better opportunities for modeling, and things like that. So, and I think it's going to be a bit of a hill to climb, but at the end of the day, AI is going to make our lives easier because it's going to take mundane things that we grind on,
Yeah.
and make those things a lot easier for us to work with. So,
No, no, and I do I do appreciate that aspect, but I'm I'm just
it's
we're
early.
as physicians that we see how the electronic medical record system, was promised, to be this amazing thing. It doesn't really check off boxes. Let me give you an example. Like you can have a patient come in, you can order something on an
Mhm.
electronic medical record system, but an order doesn't mean anything. It has to actually happen. The patient has to get there. They have to get the X-ray. They have to get the lab. They have to get to that consultation. It requires a human to be like, "Hey, did you do that? Did you get there?" So that
Yeah.
when you come back, those things have happened and we can advance your care. We've allowed this system that, oh, I check the box, but it doesn't happen without human care.
So
And
it needs
that's
that. Yeah, and I was going to say, I think with my case, my doctor has CNAs that basically their job is to call and bug me to go, hey, you need
fantastic.
to go do yeah,
Fantastic.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, and I can see where AI maybe generates a phone call, maybe, but I would rather have a human call me up and remind me that X, Y, and Z, or hey, you got an appointment coming up, don't miss it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so
No,
uh,
I think there's definitely a lot of room for opportunity for
mhm,
artificial intelligence, and it is an important thing. But this is the part of the NLPD thing. It's like the human part,
yeah.
we have to integrate that in better because
But
we've excluded people for not great reasons because of like I said, all these systemic issues, and
well,
that's what I'm trying to fight.
yeah, organizations tend to be lazy and have a lot of inertia. And so, and
Yeah.
again, you had to figure out what inertia was with the monkey coming out of the cannon and hitting the ceiling fan. But which by the way, that's a great problem. I'm gonna have to use that someplace somewhere. Just the what a ridiculous problem to solve. So,
And I
so
remember it. That's what I mean. I remember all these
yep,
things. I remember the trauma, right?
yep,
It's the
yep.
trauma. And I've seen it like where I've seen it recently even when I've worked here, there's a student from Davis, for example, and they were like, "Yeah, we just had a physics test and the average was 40%." And what? Like what
How do you do that?
like how is that creating a learning environment? How is that creating confidence for your students, right? Why are we and it was a physics class actually too. It's like, who's watching these professors? Who is actually, and this is what these are part of the systemic aspects. I think we have to change. We can't allow the status quo. And maybe that requires laws. Maybe that requires, like, how do we have universities change so that they're uplifting our students in our community?
Yeah.
Then I went in there and I spent a lot of money and I have a 2.8 GPA to show. Like, it's a business interaction. I spent all this money to go to college and I really was trying. It's not, and that's where I think I don't my experience in community college convinces me that there's a lot of smart people, right? And we have to give them the opportunities to learn and to do well. And I think, yeah, there's maybe some people that shouldn't go into medicine for sure, or shouldn't go into specific fields, but I believe that there are a lot of smart people. And so we are not benefiting them if we're creating these barriers to get ahead.
I absolutely agree. So, well, this has been great. You have a great story that I'm gonna enjoy wrapping up. You actually touched on all the little points. My little checklist of stuff that we should talk about this because I did want to talk about the National Latino Physicians Day, which I'm gonna see. I'll talk to some folks around here because we should be celebrating stuff like that at community colleges
Yeah,
because
agree, agree.
you got started here and you're not the first doctor that I've heard of it, but you're the first one I've actually had a chance to. And the amazing
and the fact that we presented community college in front of the federal
Yep.
government as an important starting point,
Yep.
and the law to start to quantify how many students come from a community college. We also have an article in the Scientific American about community college as a way to diversify the workforce.
Yeah.
I'll have to think that's part of the reason why we're having a physician shortage is also the lack of a strategy to diversify the workforce. They're just using the same, like, all right, you get a good GPA, you get a good MCAT, you get to go to medical school, we'll shift you into the next thing. No, we need people that really care and want to go back to these communities. We do.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's going to be laws, but there also has to be a change in culture within the educational community, because a lot of times you get these things that are, they become nice to haves, but not must haves. And something like diversity within medicine, because the fact is more people are going to be speaking Spanish in California very soon than any other language. And so it's like, why not have physicians that can actually consult, talk to people in those languages, which I'm not really clear on why that would not be a want.
Yeah,
so,
I agree with you. But it's happened. There's resistance. There really is. Part of that bill, if you look at the language for AB 2080, our initial introduction of the bill was to focus on language, to make language a requirement to get into medical school.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't accept that. Like we weren't allowed to move that part forward.
Wow.
So some of those questions is why, and we can teach language, people come out of high school, right? Learning some basic Spanish, but we got to apply it, right? We got to make it a requirement if it's taught, or how can we integrate it in a better way?
Yeah, I know my son who worked at a restaurant for a number of years. And so
Fantastic.
he got fantastic.
Everyone's
Spanish.
Latino in the back, right?
Yep. Oh, the best cooks ever are Latino. And it's like, what's Anthony Bourdain said that. And he says there, he's talking about 5-star, or 3-star Michelin restaurants. He says they're all Latino.
Yeah.
They're the best. Yeah. But he said, it's like, my son, it's like, he's the one that speaks Spanish in the family. And he
should become a physician.
Yeah.
Or he's needed. I'm serious.
He's an electrician in the union, so it's a journeyman electrician. So, but yeah, I'll see if he wants to change careers. He's a bit further.
I'm an electrician. I connect nerves back together.
Oh, yeah. Yours is a little more. His most thing is apprentices get on his nerves, but that's another thing. So
my dad is an electrician.
Oh wow! Oh, that's right.
Electrical engineering school in Peru. And he had a business for a long time. He still has a business in Modesto where he fixes stereos.
Mm-hmm.
He can fix any electronic device, essentially. I cannot do that. That is so, I cannot do that. I just connect tubes back together to try to get them to regrow. But but thank you so much. I appreciate it today. I hope it motivates some students to consider medicine as a field. It's needed. We have so many so many communities that are in need, and it's challenging, but you can do it. You need support, and you need a plan.
Terrific. Well, again, thank you very much for your time, and we will reach out to you more. There may be an opportunity for us to connect again.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Charlie. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next, the podcast for the DVC Alumni Association. You can contact us at alumni@dvc.edu with any comments, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe to our podcast.